We're going to cover this channel in the past. And it is to suggest my complete confusion and absolute bewildering as to why people who call themselves detractors of a person find themselves leaving comments and responding readily to what that person creates. So, what this the genesis of this argument comes from the fact that back in October, when I had that spike in viewership, there were a couple of people who took it upon themselves to, um, let me just disclose. I get the whole thing of, well, I just stumbled upon this. Let me leave some nasty comment to be on my merry way. I've seen a couple of users who will find themselves going from video to video to video, leaving some comment to express their disdain or distaste for whatever opinion is espoused of mine. And, I understand that a lot of it has to do with just wanting to be contrary when it comes to how I feel about all this romance stuff, because when I count the number of videos where people have actually talked or tried to argue back with me on the subject, it's usually never a political one. I can only think of maybe twice where that's happened. And, one of the users was so stupid as to compare me to the federal government in terms of finances. They believe that I have the billions of dollars that the American government sent to Israel during Obama's tenure in office. That should show you the wavelength of intelligence we're seeing here. BVS says, and these people claim they're helping when they don't even know you. Well, I think you remember the one guy who was leaving all of those lengthy comments. His strategy, because I brought up the same point of, you have never been involved with me in any type of way that is special, or effectively you haven't actually experienced what it's like to be around me. That's what I made my argument to him is of why you're not basically in any position of just credibility to speak on me. And his response was, well, I can tell that based off of the way that you speak out here, that you're very negative and I want to talk to him. So, uh, again, I get what you're saying, VVS, but that same argument I made toward this person, they tried to make the claim that by watching a 12-minute clip online, they're now able to, they, again, as I said before, they have a window into my soul. They can tell me who I am, what I, all my whole autobiography is just apparently attainable in this 12 minutes. And it's kind of funny because if you went up and asked most of the people that are leaving these comments, when was the last time you sat down and read a book that wasn't assigned you in school? You probably, you're sitting there for a while. Um, and look, it's not to suggest that people who have critiques of something I say are all just these, loads of anti-intellectuals. Quite the opposite. But when you have people who know that they dislike something and they sit there and they go back to it over and over again, it's not just, I left this one nasty comment, I get blocked, oh well. No, it's the fact that I've seen a couple of people, there is no face. Amino, if you remember, there was a poll that was conducted that proved that 88% of the American respondents found me to be unattractive. So to to go along with that poll, we're making sure there's no facial views on this one. But what I fail to get are these people who not only will they tell you they don't like what you're saying, they will write you paragraph after paragraph trying to respond back to you. And in a couple of instances, I found myself, um, trying to talk to these, because I always say that if this is someone that just is nasty and negative, why would they sit there and write all of this stuff, without trying to maybe appear as if they want to have a rapport that can actually be accessible to both sides. And we've started seeing, and what I started to notice was that when I would go back and try to talk to these people and, you know, uh, respond back to points they made, you get, it's almost like a brain Ferris wheel. The person will, if they acknowledge what you're saying, try to find some way of spinning it to fit their own narrative. They can't concede anything. Just as I could fully concede when it comes to, my lack of loads of individuals I talk with that, from my perspective of just not bothering to really go out and talk to most people at this point, that's contributed to that. But I would still, raise the argument that that didn't start up until after I'd become disillusioned with the people I was going up to, and that's again with both genders. Um, VVS is exactly, and I understand the need to critique someone, but when you explain these experiences, they still place 100% of fault on you and tell you to meet their guidelines that others don't need to. Yeah, I told you, man, if you go on a lot of these websites, you will see posts by both genders, but more so males, which obviously, they those don't get any responses anyway, but you'll have women that'll post in there that'll say, you know, uh, I am da 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 da. You are da da da. And I'm telling you, man, if you look at that list, they will put. I've said this a couple times before, and I am repetitive like this. They will literally put down more requirements than what was needed to get the Americans back in the Iranian hostage crisis. I mean, they are. It's like the Israeli and Palestinian peace settlement would be easier to craft than to get all of the different things they want you to fit into fixed there. God, I mean, and what kills me is that because a lot of us will say, you know what, I am this, I am that. So, for example, I'll say, you know what, it's true that I don't like to be with loads and loads of people. I don't like to do collaborations because I always think that me and the person I'm doing it with are going to have some kind of, disagreement that's going to end with them saying, hey, I don't want to be in your thing anymore and mess up whatever project or various thing we're doing together. But you get to a point where you watch these comments and you see people day after day. Not even on this channel alone, right? You go on, like TYT for example, or Secular Talk, and it's you can understand from the perspectives that are espoused on those news outlets that the people commenting are going to think one way. And I'm telling you, it's like you could leave a comment for either opinion, and you'll have someone who not only feels they need to argue back and forth with you over that opinion, but will actually try to, call you out of your name. And you say to yourself, well, this is the place for me. This is a liberal leaning site. So if I see something that's liberal leaning, should you really be that surprised? Like it's like if I go up to a bee's nest, a bee, we call it one of those little places where bees go, and I take a stick and I just start smacking all these bees around, and I come back and I get stung, and I go, oh man, I can't. These bees stung me. You should expect, knowing that all these bees were in this area, that one of them is probably going to feel the need to sting you if you assault it. But they go into and they act so shocked that someone will sit there and say, no, I don't want to engage with you. I've had people who will just leave comment after comment after I've stopped responding to them, just trying to get me to talk. But I said, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're not going to change my mind. Really, if you want my mind to be changed, people would act in a way that, would make what I'm saying, not true. So, for example, in making the argument that I have about how, the current relationship model is a failure, I've pointed to divorce rates and also, these children that are born in, out of wedlock and in these single parent households to suggest that it's not about who can get in bed with who, but who stays with who. A lot of guys don't want to accept the fact, and this will probably boost their ego, including my own, that whereas you are not able to maybe start a relationship, a lot of these people who get in them don't keep them. Yeah, and this VVS, I haven't had to do that with too many installments, but I mean, every day I was getting a notification from someone talking about, this, that, and the other. Yeah, well, Amino, Chad is not going to stay with them, is what I'm trying to get you to recognize. That for as much as people like to believe that, this is something that only you are having a problem with, even though we have loads and loads of us who can attest to having the same issues. a lot of the people who supposedly don't have problems still end up having to get with others in some oftentimes failed attempts to get what they wanted that first time around. Let me read what Wicked Gesture says. He said, people are so argumentative nowadays. People are more interested in being right rather than solving the problem. Yeah, but I can understand having an argument, but or having an opinion, but at what point do you just say, you know what, this isn't helping. All we're doing is name calling each other. I mean, in a lot of those sections, I saw you even saw it with that one stream where after I told this user, I'm not interested in playing a game where I give you my answers, and then your response is just say, no, it doesn't matter, and just refused to let it go. Just kept typing more things to try and get me to talk back to him over and over again, and then lies in the stream and says, "Oh yeah, I'm subscribed to you." I said no, because when someone subscribes, you get an email, obviously, but lies in there to make it seem as if we're all friends here, man. We're all buddies here, and it's just so creepy because you say to yourself, you knew what you were getting involved in. This isn't the first time you. It's not. See, people have to get out of this idea that the person was just watching YouTube videos about whatever topic that was, and then just randomly crashed into your content on the matter. And even if they did, most people when they see something that they disagree with, and we know this because if it were true that a video with 200,000 views would have as many comments as those who saw it. Most people won't say something in relation to a video they watch. They just won't post a comment. So it almost feels like kind of this game where you're supposed to just sit there. Let me write with read what Amino says. They would rather share chat with other women, though Chad will never commit to them than to date. Really have to stop using that term, man. It's not helping anyone's case. What if VVS has a son and he names him Chad? How is VVS son going to feel when he reads that you blamed him for how these people behave now? You took his name and stuck it on the name of all these nefarious characters. So I'm just saying I really would prefer that term be dropped, um, because I don't see what good it does. Let me see if I read everyone's comment. Uh, yeah, it's just a continuous pattern that I find very strange, especially given the fact that I mean, if we go out of the romantic thing, right? People have a low tolerance for anything that's not an opinion of their own. In me not being an official who's in power or someone that is, because I always look at a scale of 1 to 10 when it comes to notability. So, for example, if you ask yourself what is the highest pinnacle of just being famous, that's typically a head of state, like a president or a prime minister, or some major artist. Like for example, even though he never held office before, I would consider someone like Michael Jackson a 10 out of 10 in terms of notability because you have a large group of people of all ethnicities that will not only listen to his music but actively try to find out things about his life. Uh, I mean, I've answered this question on like 7 or 8 other streams. That's enough. Go back and watch a couple of those. Load me up with some more views if you want to answer that question. But I would consider myself maybe a 1 or a 2 at the most, and just to have people actually sit there and do like a whole what do you call it, barrage of comments to try and get you to respond back to them or to try and express their disapproval of you. It just feels strange to me. Yeah, I mean, comments like that are inspiring me to go and make a we call put a little stat sheet on my site. Like, oh, I'm this height. I'm you know, from here, whatever. So if everyone is going to keep asking that same question, And I've already stated before that in being above average height, I have seen no difference in how I am treated than anyone who's below that height. Wicked Gesture says, yeah, the way debates are run today are weird. It makes you feel obliged to explain things you already explained. They just refuse to listen because they think their opinion is superior. I think I told you guys about what happened when me and that person went back about Carter, where he said he wasn't a great leader or something, and then I mentioned that he didn't get us in any wars, and that's been my critique of all of the presidents that have come after him because, like in World War II, we got attacked and we were responding to something that happened to us. Whereas now it just feels like they start these things up to go and load up cash for the military industrial complex. And, and this is obviously one of many things that I liked about Carter in particular. But this person seizes on the one sentence of me saying, well, first, he didn't get us in any wars, and then proceeds to do a verbal filibuster where he starts talking about, um, I can't argue against facts when he even acknowledges himself. I didn't, make up anything that wasn't proven or, not notable or true. So he basically admits that his own quote came out of nowhere, and then goes back to doing whatever he was doing before. They seize on something you say, and this is another running theme of it's called hit and run arguing. For example, I posted this one thing on Instagram about I think Trump, or no, I think it was the press secretary. She said something about the U.S. supporting some kind of democracy in whatever country or whatever, to try how they're for fair and good things. And then I pointed out the fact that the U.S., since at least the Obama years, have been backing over 70% of the world's dictatorships. And their response was to have someone posted on there, this has been going on with every single president since the beginning of time. I said, wait a second, do you have anything anywhere to prove that, anywhere to actually verify what you're saying? And I asked this person, in my responding comment, they don't respond back, so they get blocked and deleted. But I gave them about maybe 2 3 days to say something back because I really wanted to see what their response would be. And look, here's the thing: you can have whatever not true or ridiculous opinion you want, but if you're going to come to it's not like you just sat there and you post on your own account, which I've done a number of times, and that people, because of the hashtag system, try to leave something nasty anywhere, and it always felt weird. Just you know, I can post this on my profile. You can now come over here and say something to me, but after I knock down or try to, defend my position, you get offended. But you're the one who came over. You invited yourself into the argument that you now don't want to partake in. Like if a guy writes a book, let's pretend I didn't do streams, or I just did a 30, 40 minute video where I just talked about this stuff. And everyone starts writing comments. I say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then people, post, I can't believe you would say this. I'm not going to respond to that person. That's because I already know they're not objectively. What I've tried to do here is give you arguments that are backed by either an experience I've had, some numbers that we know, and you can make of it what you will. Elliot, you can go and replay the first 18 minutes of the stream if you're confused by the title. There's an obsession with commenting that is just, I don't understand it for the life of me. It makes no sense, in my opinion, anywhere. And what I've tried to do so often on here is not be, because I always thought that if someone were to sit there and be cordial in presenting an alternate view, especially if you go to a lot of these websites and different commentators, they're yelling and screaming and hollering. I've tried to make it to where we get a calm version of something that might not be our own interpretation or a view that we've had before. And it just feels like you have people who, in response to seeing a kind of demure, not really hostile presentation of that view, can't exchange the same mentality, and you'll find them going out of their way to try and almost begrudgingly go after you in terms of just their argument back. And a lot of times their argument is so incoherent because they're sitting over here being just downtrodden with emotion. You say to yourself, just calm down. I mean, I get to a point where there are just certain things on here that I just started banning. Because for all of the latter part of last year, I wouldn't talk about any of these police shootings, um, or any of these other, quote unquote, race related issues because I was pretty convinced that people, I've seen them do, were going to come on my content and lose their mind just because I said I don't think it was this way. And I've even had people get mad at me for not assuming that, something was motivated by what somebody looked like. And so after a while, I actually signed a little declaration that I would leave all of those cases alone. I only started talking about the black community in particular because I was bothered by the tendency among the women I approached who were for the most part of my own ethnicity to almost unceremoniously stay away from any guy that seemed to commit to them. And I'm sure this behavior is also in other ethnic groups of women, but I'm saying that from my own personal experience, that was the group I chose to, more so to speak with. And I was, and I've been more around people of that ethnicity than others. Um, and look, even in saying that, I would still admit freely that there are, exceptions to the rule. That 70% that's by itself is not, 100. So there's always going to be a small group that doesn't, fit that path that I've condemned. But in trying to diagnose what was causing this, people don't want to accept the fact that, we as individuals choose who we want to associate with. I could pick right now if I were a woman to go over to some man's house and jump in bed with him that I barely know. And if I, were to get pregnant by that guy, I could go and say, okay, well, I don't want to have this child with him because I don't want to have it by itself. These are all things that we as people pick and decide to do on our own. Um, but for whatever reason, when you try to assign that to the person that is responsible for it, there is this tendency to get backlash. Um, and it's really weird. If I were to sit here and talk about guys and say, "Oh man, you guys are the reason you can't get with anyone," yeah, yeah, you wouldn't have any women coming on there and saying you shouldn't talk so horribly about men. They try hard, they work hard, yada yada yada. But if I speak about ways in which I felt offended by things done by women, you'll have guys who will come on here and call themselves, defending this behavior or explaining it or, criticizing me for not playing into it. When for the sad reality is that I, like many others who have expressed their disillusion with how things are now, have for many years tried to, pander and do these things that supposedly are designed to, go in line with whatever that these women want that is supposedly what it takes to form the modern relationship, which in responding to that same commentator who said that I was a hypocrite for not I was a hypocrite for preaching for self accountability while saying that other factors were in the way of me not being able to get with someone. And I said, the thing you can't explain away, I didn't respond to that comment obviously, is that it is always going to be up to the other person to pick who they want to date and who they want to lay in bed with. There are no ifs and ands about that. VVS says, but get mad when you tell them I talk to no choice but to do that. Um, no, but I was telling him, in my responses, I cannot make someone just as I can't make a video get 100 views or in one case 200,000. I can't make people pick and choose who they're going to date, what they're going to do. I can't make these commenters who are leaving all this nasty stuff stop doing that. and I tried to explain it. I have the same, see, because what is so aggravating about advocating for the marriage thing and still believing that people should try to be together if they're going to spawn these children is that I'm very sympathetic to the plight of many of the black children that have been born. Other groups, obviously, many of these kids who are born to these single parent households um, over the last 10, 15, whatever years, because I know that they couldn't control who their parents were. They couldn't control that, their mother and father were not together, in an officially binding way, and did not exercise the long-term commitment prior to, getting touchy-feely in a on a mattress. So I've been able to say, that critique is done also because it says don't just worry about yourself. You might also destroy or worsen the life of someone that could come afterward. But people don't want to recognize this. Kylo says yes, we have to play the numbers game to find. I mean, yeah, I think the most I ever spoke to at once was probably about 4 or 5, and 3 of those I ended up actually cutting off communication with because I said, "Look, we're not getting anywhere. You're having me play around in circles." I spoke with each of those for at least, I think the shortest one was maybe a month. Um, but the point is that this isn't just do not believe the falsified origin. I didn't just go outside one day, have someone say, "No, I don't like you," and then, "Oh, I'm gonna make a video about it." That's like 100% get maybe 5 or 6. Yeah, that seems about in line with what I've been saying, that the numbers are skewed, and what is so strange is that people try to make it seem as if they're not. You have guys who are able to get multiple um, women, 3, 4, 5, sometimes dating them simultaneously or trying to be with them all at one time, cheating on their partner. And then you still have people who will come on here and say, "Well, there's more women than men, so there's no reason for why you shouldn't be with someone." Then you say to yourself, "Well, factor in the other things to consider here. Think of the fact that, for example, even in there being more women than men, you have to ask yourself how many times are those women going to be in the age group of the man? Are we, is that number conducive to certain age groups or certain locations? How many of those majority of women are going to be in that guy's town? Are going to be in that guy's general vicinity to where it's even possible to access them? So it becomes more difficult. And let me respond to what's being said here. When you factor in what's known about these numbers and what's not known about them. Chester says, "I just don't care. I don't have much friends in real life anyway. Too many disrespectful people thinking they can treat you any way they please." Yeah, and I've had to deal with that personally in the last year or so, and it almost feels like kind of I'd laugh at it if were it not happening to me directly, probably, but you've had so many people I've seen that I've spoken with. They'll go, "Why don't you want to talk to me? Why don't you want to speak to me?" And I always say, my problem is the fact that I've spoken with loads and loads of people, and in getting the reaction I receive from a majority of them, which is to either stop responding after a while, and then go into some ridiculous behavior afterward, or just completely act as if I didn't exist. I don't have much interest in trying to expand that group of people I talk with. I just don't, because I have met a number of individuals. It's a small group, a number of individuals that don't fit that category or that stereotype that I'm talking about. They've been able to break the mold in terms of actually showing interest back when I want to speak with them, and living up to various pledges that they'll make or things that they say they'll do that I just haven't seen on the part of many of our contemporaries, male and female. People make it seem as if just because I talk about the various women that have done nasty things, at least in my opinion, to me, that I can't recognize that there are horrible or otherwise less desirable male partners out there. I get that completely. The difference is that women do not realize the extent of their control runs very, very far. I would actually say that if you had a majority of women of dating age sign some kind of proclamation that said, we will not coalesce or be around a man who, for example, has a criminal record or whatever, you would see the number of various incidents relating to, law breaking by males, young males, that is, at least, uh, drop very significantly and very quickly. Because if there's one thing people want more than money, at least males anyway, is sex. It is relations. It is the whole 9 yards. And if they know that they can't have that because of some pattern of behavior that is diametrically opposed to the way that most women, at least proclaimingly, will feel, they're not going to engage in it. That's why you have so many guys who keep talking about, uh, wear this, do that, because they are of the belief that in doing that stuff, they are going to be presenting themselves to women in a way that they like, or that they think they like anyway. And it goes back to the whole artificial, you know, screw actually liking the person for who they are. Which, and look, a lot of people will say, um, you cannot. You will say being yourself is bad dating advice, but just my problem with not saying that or not thinking that is that in trying to duplicate other behaviors, I've noticed the tendency more often than not to find myself slipping or otherwise have lesser, in terms of length, dialogues with various people on here. So it goes, I think, both ways in terms of there's validity to the claim of being yourself and also you know doing these various other things. So, for example, I might not necessarily enjoy the idea of going out to loads of places, uh, but I'll still do that if it means, maybe increasing the chances of, just talking to more people. Okay, Kylo says, or Kilo, whichever way you would pronounce it, you could do live hangouts on YouTube and debate people, invite people to talk to. Would be interesting. I don't think that would work because, for one thing, I'd have to vet the person. Really, the only people I would think of bringing on there, because out of trust, are people I know personally. And then the problem with that is you'll have those who will say,
Well, now they've been doomed to not be able to get with someone because they've shown up and reared their feelings on this stream.
as if the stream is going to be watched by, millions of people worldwide. When in reality, and look, this is the thing that another dirty secret they don't want you to recognize, Kylo and everybody else, about having views put out there. Because I've had people say, this has ruined it for you. If you look at that we call like the alt right, for example, people say these are such disgusting opinions by men who wish they were getting laid or whatever. There is no political ideology, there is no belief system that has not stopped a group of men, or at least a majority of men, from having romantic partners. If women were so disgusted by behaviors that were racist, they most of those senators that signed that Southern Manifesto back in the mid 50s wouldn't have had wives before and after the fact. That Southern Manifesto was against civil rights, pro segregation. That you can go look it up. Look up those senators, and you'll see maybe two or three that weren't married. Everybody else was married. Um, you wouldn't have Klans members that were married. You certainly wouldn't have had female Klans members. All I'm saying is that me saying what I say, and anyone else saying something that's to the reverse of it, are not being geared down by their views being expressed. Because for every person that has distaste for your view that I've seen on here, my views anyway, it's usually a male. I can count the number of women that have actually sat here and tried to call themselves, arguing against whatever I've said on one hand, and if the number of guys is just off the boat, the record breaking, um, and it is a very strange thing to see males trying to tell you about what you've lost when, again, the only reason you started doing it was because you already didn't have it to begin with. That's like me telling a person who complains that, or who curses out their, we call it the people at the McDonald's restaurant for not doing the burger right. Oh, you've ruined the chances of getting a burger that was made well, but you only start cursing them out after they, didn't do the burger right in the first place or in the beginning. So Carlos says nowadays even good can't get if you are still not good enough. At least an 8 out of 10. Yeah, but again, with stuff like that, it's subjective. So for example, I had a guy who wrote a comment about, I think the reason you aren't getting with anybody is because you are going for the top of the top, the finest of the fine. And if that were true, how would I have been able to approach dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of women, both online and in person? Many of the ones online, me without even seeing what they looked like, just off of what they were saying, I liked enough to go and say, "Hey, let's talk." How does that work? I want an answer to that. But you're the one with the problem. You're the one that must be something wrong with you, despite the fact that bastard children number 72. They can't keep a man, that tells you. Okay, let me see what's said here. Carlos says not just a hookup app anymore. VBS says I've had the finest of the fine, like me, and I'm average looking. I don't believe in leagues. Either they like you or they don't. Kylo says leagues are definitely real. Yeah, but leagues are still, look, you're not, what a lot of people don't want to recognize and don't just choose not to say is that looks are subjective. Um, if they weren't, I wouldn't have had a couple of women come up to me, whereas loads will just ignore you. So it's still something that like, I hate that people make it seem as if every single woman likes all the same stuff. Every guy likes the same stuff. I've seen plenty of women that I saw online that I didn't think were anything more than maybe a 2 or a 3, and they had loads of guys leaving comments. Oh, yeah, so good. So I'm just saying there are men that would consider. Yeah, I probably would be fit that category, but it can't just be slightly subjective because you're still acknowledging that there is a group or a portion of that group that does not feel the same way. So there is no monolithic thought when it comes to what genders, what physical appearance the whole gender wants. You've seen short guys and tall guys get with women. You've seen, you know, very heavy set and very slim get with just all different sizes and shapes and colors that have been able to bypass this trend. What is this picture? Oh, so we really do have to get out of this mindset that things are only good for a portion of us. I would advise you try out whatever you say. Tell you, man, I'm done with the advice. That it is out the window. I want to just make a whole chronological list of different pieces of advice that people gave me and me implementing it and then getting the same result or something very identical to how things were. Go and watch all these different dating gurus online, and or read their articles, and you get a repeat. Uh yeah, well, Elliot, again, people think they're helping. They don't want to recognize that someone has legitimately hit the bottom of the barrel. Someone's gone in person, online. Where's the other places? Just everywhere. Are fake except for you. You're the last legitimate one standing. Yeah. Well, again, I think most of us want more than just sex because, again, prostitution is legal in various parts of the world, or the U.S. rather. So, where people just don't want to accept the fact that that there exists a group of men. Not saying it's everybody that doesn't just want to ride up inside of someone, um, and that's where this. See, because what you started seeing when it comes to a lot of people addressing, you know, guys having trouble with this is they want to make it seem as if it paints the picture that the men who are only men who have trouble are the shallow ones, the ones that just want to you know, go and ride up inside of someone, and they do that because they want to communicate the idea that if you are a good little boy that is so nice and is actually there for her, you'll be able to get someone. And the bad boys are the bad guys who are writing these comments online. The supposed villains or antagonists who are likely to go out and commit acts of terror, all just wanted to jump in bed with a person, no matter who they were, no matter what the scenario was. That was their only goal. That was their main fight, was to just lay up inside. So when you say things like that, it reinforces that idea, or at least it continues that narrative, which has been proven false. Because again, sex is not hard to attain. It just isn't. It's been very simple since the beginning of time to just go and ride up inside of somebody. I just wish the people who are leaving these comments would recognize that. That's why when I had the one guy who was calling himself giving advice that was leaving these loaded paragraphs, about, oh man, you just want to jump in bed, don't worry about anything. Like, dude, if that were true, I would have done that already. There are websites for that. There are various places you can go to around town for that. It's not hard. It's one of the simplest things in the world is jumping in bed and screwing someone. That is one of the easiest tasks that has ever been bestowed upon man. That's why you have so many people engaging in that line of work. Why go to school and learn how to build something with your hands or with your mind, or do anything of any creativity? No, forget that. Let's just you know jump inside. Yeah. Well, again, with the women that aren't prostitutes, how do I know that they don't have something? Not saying everybody has had 50 people they've slept with, but I told you a story of the one woman that had no problem with being with multiple guys, that she didn't, you know, and these are her words, didn't know that well. So, well, I'm bringing it up here, VVS, because I want it to be understood that people have this idea in their head that just because someone is one thing or is a professed one thing, that means only people who have that title on them or are that way. Um, so I'm trying to say that when you have various women that we don't know the record of sexually, we don't know how many men they've been with. They can tell us a number, but there's never no way of actually knowing that. Um, that you should still watch your back. You still try to figure out, is this true? Exercise caution. But again, this is not. There's no willingness to understand this. Slept with Watsu. I can't believe people actually use that term. I thought that was over. Again, when VVS has his first child with Shaquita or whatever, and they name him Chad, he's going to be very upset that so many people, were using his name to imply that something about a guy who was sleeping with everybody known to man. He's going to be very disturbed to have his name included in this in such a revolting way as to say that he just goes around laying in bed with anyone that comes his way. The black is actually uh, Who's to say that he doesn't get with someone that's not African American? Oh yeah, that's another thing that I find really amusing. Okay, so picture this: a woman who is African American will get with a Caucasian man, right? And we should be able. I personally think we should be able to date whoever we want. But they will get with the man who is Caucasian. They won't receive any critique, or actually will get defended by other African American women for being um, without a bunch of good options. But then, if a man, a African American male who, just like every other male, are going to have a harder time getting a partner in comparison to a female, decides to get with someone that is of another ethnicity, here comes the problem. Here comes both genders condemning him for leaving his counterpart. I don't understand that mindset, because it basically means that, okay, so I'm having a difficult time with getting with anyone, so I'm supposed to just sit here, be single forever, and hopefully a African American woman will want me eventually, and until then I'm supposed to just remain in my little quarter, my little box that you've subjected me to. That sounds right to anybody in there? It doesn't sound right to me. But again, they don't want to acknowledge this, because that means we have to go and admit, yeah, there are problems with, again, the culture in of itself. That there are people in our own group who act as if getting with one of their own is the worst thing ever. And look, it would make sense if I were maybe some banker, because yeah, it's there the number of partners would drastically increase. Um, And again, that's not to say everyone's a gold digger, but it is to say that there is a large number of people who do that. I have to keep explaining it that way, because people have this thing where they think that I'm speaking on everyone, which is not true. Okay, I observed the exact. It's not just. I didn't say it was just them. I'm just telling you that when you're part of a group and you get with someone that's not part of that group, you have people who will get upset with you for getting with someone that's not part of that group. And the only reason you got with someone that was not part of that group is because people within your own group, if you're male, did not want you. And look, it is a very strange conundrum where you're given three choices. You can either stay by yourself out of fear of what people of your own group will say of you, um, get with the person that comes around because you actually like them and are willing to bear the brunt of critique, or three, get with anyone that comes your way just because they're of that group. It's almost like affirmative action for dating. I don't know if you go, but have you tried? I haven't tried anything romantic at church. I know that the pastors do, but that's a story for another. They do it with both the boys and the girls. Catch my drift. Hey, that's why two people ran out of here the second I said that. They go, shh, be very, very quiet. No, it feels strange to go up into this supposed sacred house of the Lord and try to get my groove on or whatever. Again, let's discount the men's feelings, and you know. Oh, I'm a mutu as to use to communicate, so basically destined to be single forever. Uh, I mean, I once was willing to date a woman that was blind, as I've mentioned on here a couple of times. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that you might, Why don't you get with another person who communicates by sign language? I did notice that correlation that women can have all kind of mental and physical disabilities, and then they'll still be able to get some guy to you know, have sex with them. And look, it's again, I'm not saying that no one should treat them equally. I just wish the same behavior would be exercised toward males who had the same plight. And people just don't want to acknowledge. Yeah. Well, why do you think you have so many mothers who are willing to curse somebody out just because they said something about their child that was true? Like, oh, your kid did this, your kid did that. The men who slept with those women knew that they had problems, that they had, some kind of not psychological, but at least mental disability to where they can't rationalize things on this very extreme level. And still chose to jump in bed with them. So because they knew that whatever happened afterward was not going to be their responsibility. And the saddest thing is that because they're not directly involved, you have people who actually will defend the mothers and go, "Well, at least they stuck around." So yeah, they stuck around, but look what happened to their child. They treated them like, you know, for example, with every one of the various classmates I've had that's had children, whether it was in high school or in college, I've just seen them take their kids and use them as dolls on social media. Oh, look at my baby! Oh, he just turned 6 months. Oh, look at my baby! She just turned 3 years old. And just post a million pictures with them. No talk of what that kid's learned. No talk of what exercise that kid. Nothing. So I have very little sympathy for the parent. For the kid, I have loads and spades of, because they're so surviving that can be very challenging. And it's not an ideal circumstance. Really, it gets even scarier when you think about it, because um like, as I sit here and I make concessions. So, for example, there are certain things that people do I always will not like. I always will not like, littering. I don't like, these loud yelling fests that people engage in public venues so that it can get recorded and put on World Star Hip Hop. There's many of stuff I'm not a fan of, that by itself does not constitute a large enough issue where I would go and make a stream about it and say this is a horrible thing, and if you engage in it, this tells us a lot about you. But you get to a point where you just sit there and you say to yourself, wait a second. So people readily refuse to read any, like, for example, there are a couple of videos of people talking down on Martin Luther King Day, why it shouldn't exist, yada yada yada. I have no immediate reason to side with them, but I have to concede the points that they'll make. They'll talk about in these videos having people come to them and go, "How dare you?" And the guys will, they will point out, how many times have you seen someone who actually condemned me for having my opinion ever acknowledge reading a book or any other form of literature about King? Um, and just as I sat here and was talking negatively about Obama, because people like to think I'm partisan. I only like one party when I think both of them suck. How many people that are going to sit here and defend him until their dying breath actually read a book about him or went and did any research into the drone strikes or the surveillance theory or anything else I've criticized him for that was started by his direct predecessor, that I criticized these last three presidents for, and you won't hear it. So that's that. Uh, Cycles of civilization. The truth is, Western civilization had its peak 100 years ago. Now it's dying culturally. That's why we have all these problems now. Yeah, I can see that. Um, I just wish more people were able to. Is what I'm saying. Well, Donahue is the 11th hour ranger yet again. Wicked gestures. I've actually had a woman get mad at me for being mute. You learn to communicate. You go like me, yes, because I can totally change this condition overnight. Well, again, she's nasty for doing that, but it goes back to what I said about how people who are condemning, individuals that identify themselves as incels, and saying, "Oh, they just want to have sex, and they're mad they can't have sex," are not acknowledging the fact that if they wanted to have sex, they could just pay off a prostitute. And these that group that they're talking about is not the moral compass of the world. Like I said, go look up the signers of the Southern Manifesto. All of those senators who signed that racist document, you can find, were, for the most part, were married. If you go and look at many notable members of the Klan, they're married. If you look at any despicable world leader that we condemn today, whether it's Hitler or Stalin, they had female partners. There was no trouble with getting women to, you know, lay up in bed with them or do something sexual with them. So I really despise the fact that, we can't just acknowledge, yes, this is something that people are hurt by because they have tried to, act in ways that were respectful to the person that they were with. For example, when I was first, getting my thing of approaching going on, I used to call up, women with regularity and go, oh, hey, how are you doing? I hope you're all right. And now, oftentimes, I don't even, if they call me, I'll answer their calls. I don't respond to their text. And that's usually repeat offenders. So if it's someone that has a history of just being flaky, again, to quote a certain comedian's father, you get what you gave. Um, and I've noticed my own change in terms of how I deal with them over the last couple of years of just getting tired of bothering to associate with them. It's the same thing with these comments. A lot of times someone writes a comment that is nasty, that has a little bit of seeming as if it's trying to make an argument. I get tempted to respond. Now I just ignore it. And if the because the person who's writing it is trying to grandstand and look good for whoever they're trying to appeal to, and if their comment was really one that they weren't trying to make just so they could have a public record of going against whatever I'm saying, they would send it to me as a direct message. I've had not a single person send me a direct message that was rude or disgusting, but yet loads of them do that on a certain video. And you ask yourself, is it because the person thinks they can't, that's the only way to contact me, or is it just because they're trying to rally support for whatever agenda that they have themselves, which is to try and appear to be the successor, the successful person amid critiquing me and anyone else who agrees with my, perspective on how things are now. Uh, so all of it is disingenuous. All of it is nasty. Um, I really have nothing but disdain for how things are. You say you have to talk on your for hours, just random. Wait, what? You say you have to vet people to talk on it, yet you Skype talked for hours with this random. I never Skype talked with the transgender. No, I didn't. And also, you're misstating what I said. I said that if I were going to have someone actually make an appearance in a video, whether it was a stream or something else, I would need to know the person and have a confidence that they would not do something that I could not edit out, for example. You know, start talking about someone that isn't relevant here or not keeping privacy concerns. So, me having a call with a person that was in privacy, I don't really see how that's applicable to what I was saying earlier. Wicked Gesture says women just don't know what they want. If they're polite, they think you're a wimpy nice guy. If you're a bit, think you're a complete monster. It's just no winning. Uh, yeah. I mean, I've seen behaviors that are just. I don't get it. I really don't understand how they don't comprehend where I would feel sick of playing these games, but also to where they have to keep leaving a comment. They just have to let me know. Oh, I can't believe you would do this to me. But again, this falls on deaf ears, and people are going to keep up the same failed bad patterns. Both leaving comments on my stuff and expecting a response when, again, what I've, if, and, this is now my new philosophy. Um, I will explain my position over and over again in a stream or a video, and if someone leaves a comment trying to ask about it or engage with me about it, I won't respond because for too long have I realized that people res- are more likely to comprehend something if it's spoken to them based off of the way culture is now, where we can't, we've basically lost belief in documents or in just any written form of communication. They can know my tone and just everything else. So if I sit here and you really can't make out in a 50, 30, however minute video or stream what my position was or see the validity in it, that's it. So your comment will not get responded to, might even get deleted. Who knows? But I appreciate those who have came, and I'll have something else out tomorrow, or maybe even today if we're lucky. So thank you.